we are always trying to find happiness or completeness or wholeness in the movement of life or in the forms or in what's happening.
Yeah.
And you say, and others say that it's impossible. And why is it not possible? Because, it's the only thing we see. Where else should we seek? It's all we see,
Yeah.
We can't see anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is impossible for that person, and it's totally disheartening when the person really realizes it. But most of the time the person doesn't realize it because it still believes that something's going to happen to it. But this is the part of non-duality where people can take this too personally and sort of mix it with the relative level, with the human level, and become depressed. So
Yeah,
while you feel like a seeker, that's all that's important to you. As a separate person, all that's important to you is seeking pleasure.
right.
And sorry, I'm just putting my feet up. I'm having a little move around. That's all that's important to you. Is seeking for something. If you stop that, if you try to stop that, what will happen is a depressive feeling will come up. And the reason that the depressive feeling will come up is because all you've ever known your whole life as a person is to seek from something and to have that excitement from seeking for something, to have the excitement of looking. That's that like and that high, like it's exciting when you think that you're going to get something, and when you think that like something, you're going to get attention, or you're going to get love, or you're going to be successful. It's really super exciting. And when you take that away, and when you begin to take that away from someone, and when someone stops seeking, then what they're left with is their feelings. And often that becomes overwhelming for someone, and they become depressed with that.
Right.
Because they begin to tell themselves the other story. I'm never going to get there. It's never going to work for me. I'm never going to have success. Partly they begin to tell themselves the opposite story, and they begin to hear the opposite story, which always comes with the positive. So in order to have the story, I am going to get there, and I am going to get it, and I'm going to find the woman tonight, or I'm going to find the man tonight, or I'm going to get the best job, you have to, by default, have the opposite story of I'm not going to. You have to have both. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's like, in order to know that you're tall, you have to bear in mind short.
In order to what?
No, you're tall. A tall person, a high person.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
somebody that's got height.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to know that you've got height, you have to know and keep in mind simultaneously the idea of short.
Right. Yeah.
So in the idea that you're going to get something, you have to simultaneously hold the idea that you're not going to get something.
Right.
So in the idea that you're going to achieve it tonight, and you're going to find that woman or find that man, or become a really rich, successful person, you have to hold the opposite idea, that you won't.
Yeah. Right.
So when
Yes.
you begin to stop seeking for that and stop hoping that you're going to get it, what can happen is the opposite story takes over, and you begin to feel like a failure and that you're never going to get it. It's like the one that you are going to get it is louder than the one that you're not. So when you're fixated on that you are going to get it, it's louder. But when you begin to not tell that story, then often the opposite story comes up, that you're not going to get it. So you begin to get depressed and you get overwhelmed by
That's the
that.
case for me right now.
Yeah.
The opposite story coming up.
Yeah. So you get
Yeah.
overwhelmed by those feelings. And when you're seeking in non-duality, often you believe that story. Like it's like that story begins to come up and you believe that there's something wrong with you, that you're not going to get it. That story in a way feels more believable than the story that you are going to get it. But you're not even conscious of this. Often, a lot of the time, it's unconscious. You're conscious of the thoughts, but a lot of people, it is unconscious, and the body just gets more and more tense over years, and more stressed about things, and more living in stories of hatred, of jealousy, of deception, of nastiness. Like it fixates on putting other people down and finding superiority there, and it just gets
I'm
itself.
just in despair right now. I'm just in despair right now,
Yeah.
I feel like I never find completeness again, something.
Completeness. But the thing is you never had it in the first place. So this is where you've got to unmix the levels. So when you've had those awakenings, it never happened to you as a person. Because right now, I know this is so hard to hear, but that which I'm speaking to, that which is listening, isn't the person. But the person follows what I'm saying. So the thoughts follow what I'm saying. That collection of the person follows what I'm saying. It has these experiences and it claims it for itself. And what you've got to understand the difference between is the difference between what it is to be a person and that awakening. And that awakening never happens to the person. The person is always a play happening in the dream. And as a...
But how can you say that it doesn't happen to the person when you're talking right now as a person?
You think I am.
Yeah.
But that's your projection.
It's my projection.
In comparison to your experience, you then put that onto my... So you have a particular experience and then you think that that's what my experience is. Just like if you look at a dog, when most people look at a dog, they project a sense of self into the dog, but the dog has no... What's happening here is things are just spontaneously coming out of no place and there's no sense of Lisa having an experience.
Wow.
So actually when I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm drunk or I'm stoned. I'm so intimate with what's happening, I can't feel like it's happening to someone. It feels so spacious. But, so you project that and you think, but there's another level that has to be taken into consideration, and that is the personal level. So the person always has to move towards pleasure. So therefore, if you're young, you're most probably got out into the world and you've been conditioned that you've got to have a job and you're feeling fear about money, you don't know what your future's going to be, all these sorts of things. And these are two different subjects.
Okay. So non-duality and getting it in the world are two different subjects.
So it's like the person has to survive. The person... On the relative level, the person has to survive and has to have means of survival. And that's not a bad thing. Non-duality is not going to sort that out for you.
Okay, yeah.
That's not going to sort out that personal problem. That's not going to sort out that personal problem. But the reason that you're getting it all in such knots is because of fear around job. But this is going to take ages to talk about. Like this can take hours of us to go through it. It's not so simple that I can wrap it up in the next half an hour, and I have to really get to know you, like your dynamic. But on the personal level, you need to take care of your basic needs, like on the personal level. On the absolute level, you are not the doer. And the more that that's seen, the more that the person will begin to take care of its basic needs. The reason you're stuck at the moment is because everything's confused. And you're trying to get away from fear of survival through non-duality, through listening to non-duality. On a personal level, the person is trying not to feel the fear of having to hunt and survive for itself and having to... And it's so many different things that are confused. It's because you see yourself in this timeline, so therefore it feels overwhelming trying to make decisions because you're saving yourself. And this is where non-duality will take care of it, because that is an illusion that you've got to make this life decision of what you're going to do and how you're going to earn money, and that you've got the next 50 years of life in order to carry that decision. That's not true either.
That's exactly my worries, work and next 50 years and stuff like that. Yeah.
But basically what begins to happen with non-duality is you begin to understand yourself better as a person. So therefore the choices will happen more easily. Even though it's not ultimately your choice, the body still needs to make choice between this job or that job. So you'll begin to understand yourself better. But at the moment you're most probably mixing up the absolute with the relative. And then on the absolute, but the absolute is that you move back to that stillness, but the person still has to be a person. The person still has to produce money and do a job and live a daily life. You know, we listen to stories of Ramana and the Buddha, and I'm not against being homeless, but it's just not practical in our society. You could be homeless, but Ramana got brought food by his mother. It's accepted in Indian society to be a spiritual person that gets fed for society. So in the Buddha's day, that you, out of respect, you always gave food to the monks. So wherever he went, even though it's really profound what he did, and I really love the Buddha story, and I really love the fact that they were homeless and the way they lived their life, but in our society it's not like that at all. We haven't got any reverence for this in our society.
Yeah.
And you've been trained for 20 years, I'm not sure how old you are, but for 20 years,
23.
23 years, that you've got to have a job in our society and that you've got to do things in our society. Basically, there just needs to be undoing. There needs to be some psychological undoing on the personal level. You need to understand yourself as a person. And then on the other level, there needs to be the repetitive listening to non-duality and seeing that who you are isn't the person. But at the moment, your person is most probably trying to be non-dual, and that's never going to work. Your person's got to be a person, and the person has to provide food for itself and have a basic...
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the last years, I always was really into absolute non-duality. I really tried to be the observer and to distance myself from life. But now I'm going to recognize that the person can't be separated from this, you know. And it's a part of life like everything else, and I have to do my things in daily life. And
I mean, if you want some time and some space to really listen to non-duality, you know, in India they do have ashrams where you can go and do that, and you live a really cheap life for a couple of years to really be able to hear this. But it's going to come to the point again where you have to provide for yourself. Ultimately, it's life providing, but it's going to be doing it through that body.
Yeah, there would be so much more to talk with you, Lisa, and I think I'm going to book a private session with you.
Yeah, we have to do it bit by bit, because the thing is what often happens, especially when you're young. Like I got into non-duality when you're young. You're trying to take care of survival needs through non-duality, and I'm not saying that it's not fucked up the way that our society does it, and I don't agree with our society, but this is the society we're in. With the and so we think we get into maybe like society or life will provide when we stop being someone, which it will, but it's going to provide through that body doing something. It will provide, and the more and more you learn who you truly are as a person, the more that you'll follow your heart and you'll earn money and survival through doing that. But you're still going to have to do something, and then also listening to non-duality, because you aren't that person as well. Like who you are is this space, this freedom.
I've heard this 10,000 times before. And there is really, it feels like in the last years it's getting more spacious, you know. I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but I don't feel that much contracted anymore. But it's still, you know, not completely recognized.
And then the person gets into very negative thought patterns because it begins to identify with it. Like, I'm not the doer, I can't do anything.
Yeah, I've got this behind me. Thanks God, I've got this behind me, I think. As I said, I'm now really trying to get my stuff together now as a person. And on the other side, also listen to non-duality. Maybe not hardcore non-duality like Tony Parsons or something, but maybe you are kind of expressing non-duality. Or there are other people as well, like Eckhart Tolle. And a lot of other good people.
Nice. But also the personal level does need to be taken care of. And understanding what it is to be human. Like these bodies are designed to eat, these bodies are designed to move towards pleasure. Like this is often not spoken about. And there's a reason why it's not spoken about, because there's so much identification to that. You're never going to find completion in pleasure. So you're never going to find completion in your job, in your lover, in any of that. But those sorts of things need to appear. You can save up some money and go and live in an ashram for a period of time, and
maybe I will do that.
And then that allows the process to, not the process, but it allows that seeing to, and the things and the feelings to come up and to be expressed. But then eventually it's going back to chopping wood and fetching water.
Absolutely, can't be for the whole life.
Yeah.
just living in an ashram and chill the whole day on the mountain or something.
Yeah.
And you know, currently there's such a big crisis in my life because I studied psychology and I broke that up because it wasn't right anymore. And now I've got injury and illness which prevents me from living normally in daily life, you know. And I'm just, you know, at home today. I'm going to take for a walk and stuff like that. And now I'm really with myself and I'm sometimes really in despair.
Yeah.
But now
And
I have really.
what sort of things did the despair come up with?
Huh?
What sort of stories does this despair come up with when it
Maybe that
comes?
this illness might be for the whole life or this injury, which I don't want to talk about what specifically it is, but the fear is that it might stay for the rest of my life, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, yeah. And so the reason why you're going into distress about it is because you're imagining yourself with a life. And one level that has to happen because you need to make
Yeah.
plans for your life, but in the body, because ultimately
Yeah.
you've never had a life.
And you know what other big thought pattern is, which keeps repeating itself. It's like, you know, I can't function anymore in daily life normally because of that. And that is really true. I can't work or something. And, you know, I guess it's just a period of time. It's just a temporary crisis and it will go away.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
I would,
life gave me that situation to go deeper into myself. I don't
I
know.
would really go into that feeling underneath, like that
Yeah.
feeling underneath it of feeling stuck
Yeah.
and feeling unable to look after yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would really have it, the next time it comes up, just give yourself half an hour to let that sensation just take over your body. Don't do it all
Yeah.
day, just but really do it as an exercise. See that it can never really hurt you. It just feels awful.
Yeah.
It's not true.
It's not true, but it feels so true because it's the honest thing I perceive, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
And really you don't perceive it though. That feels like you're perceiving it, but you don't perceive it. It's an imagination of that. It's an imagination of the next moment and what you'll look like in the next moment.
Yeah. Yeah, the personal experience is really strange, you know. It feels like I'm somewhere in the head and I have a body and all the same thoughts are coming again and again. But also on the other side, there's a recognition of something unknowable, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm also going into psychotherapy right now. It really helps also, you know, because otherwise the thoughts would only circle around in the head and in the space here. And otherwise, when I have therapy, I can speak it all out, you know,
Yeah.
and it goes out of the system.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually wrote down 10 questions or so to you, but we can talk in a private session if you want.
Yeah. It might be that we need to go really deep into the illness and everything, and if you don't want to speak about it.
Yeah. I hope I get the money from my parents for doing the private session, but I think it's okay because my mother is very supporting and my parents are very supporting at this time for me, so it must be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if not, we can. You can still write to me anyway, and we can see what I can sort out. But you can also
Yeah.
call back on Ustream.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah. I just write you an email if I want to make a private session.
Yeah. And if there's problems with money, there's always
Yeah,
there's
but it
always
will
flexibility.
be all right. I think it will
Yeah.
be all right.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question, or do you want to go on to another
No.
speaker?
No.
Okay, I have so many written down. You know, I always collected it when I was driving with the car, when I was walking around, when a question came up, which is also all the time circling around. I write it down
Yeah.
so I can ask you that. So, okay, it doesn't feel right now to ask these questions. You know, these were relevant then, but not now anymore. Okay, here is a good one. So my mother has the cause of miracles, or cause in miracles. And you know, there's the famous sentence in the beginning, which really touched me, and I would like to hear your interpretation of it. It's something like nothing real. Oh no, wait a minute.
It's beautiful. I've heard it before, but I've forgotten
Nothing
it.
unreal exists, and nothing real can be threatened, or something like that. And what would you say is the real?
The real is the stillness, not a stillness that you can see, but that which is experiencing it now, that which sees everything, not something that can be looked at, but that which is seeing, that essence, that sense of being, and that can never be affected, ever. What's affected is everything that appears within the dream, and then there's the identification with the person that appears in the dream, and then that's when the suffering appears, and never be hurt, never destroyed. And that's what is real. But in a way you say it's real, but that's comparison to unreal, so that even belongs in the dream. So it's too impossible to give it any label. But that's what I think that they're talking about. But it's so beautiful, that sentence.
Yeah. There's also a sense of that when I hear that, you know, a little connection with it, or I don't know the English word. But on the other hand, I'm going to the head and try to understand it intellectually, which would never work, you know. But somewhere in the background, in the body, I don't know, it's heard, you know. It's heard. But the most of the focus in my body, in this body, is, you know, in the head and in the body. So I'm so identified with it, and most of the time can't hear the other things.
Yeah. And it's not you that's really got to hear it, it's happening anyway. That what you've got to do as a person, on the personal level, where you feel like you're a doer, you've got to understand yourself and understand how you're always compromising yourself by trying to get it out in the flow. So just seeing that the body moves towards pleasure and moves to avoid pain, and then the person is always trying to sell itself in order to get its pleasure. So whether that be not say something because it wants to be liked by the other, or whether it's avoiding something because it doesn't want to feel fear. So it doesn't stand up for itself because it doesn't feel fear. It doesn't want to feel fear. And then what happens on the surface is we have an idea of ourselves, and we're always trying to put our actions into our idea of ourselves. So when we don't stand up for ourselves, we might have an idea of ourselves that we do stand up for ourselves. So when we don't stand up for ourselves and we let somebody be inappropriate, we then try to make that fit with our image of ourselves. So we keep retelling the story of how bad they were, or how cunning they were, or manipulative they were, or we retell the story of why we didn't say anything. Or we just avoid that and we go into another story altogether. We try to ignore it, whatever it is. So we've got this image of ourselves that we're always trying to live up to, and then we've got this obsession, we're trying to find freedom in pleasure, and you'll never find freedom in pleasure. So while you feel separate, there's got to be an exploration of what it is to be human, like what it is to be you, what that you is.
Maybe this means also, you know, going into really just let the despair and the crisis and the depression be here for a while, you know.
Yeah.
Because that's human too, in a way.
Yeah, can be. Yep.
Yeah. If it is now and I can't do anything against it, it is here, you know, it will go away.
Yeah, it will go away.
Yeah.
And just trying your best to explore that. Like explore what that feels like. Explore what you're doing to it. Explore the stories you're telling yourself about it. Explore the identity you're trying to avoid or get to.
How would you recommend to explore the stories, you know, which I'm telling myself?
If you just get a bit of time alone, I recommend this slide. So you start with the surface story. So if you've got an obsession about something, so something that your mind's circling about, so maybe it's something somebody did. So you start with that and you look at what it's telling you. And so if you're really hating them and blaming them a lot, just look at that and notice there's a lot of blame forming in your mind about someone.
In my story, it's more about me, not about others.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
guilt about something
Yeah.
you've done or not done.
Yeah.
So be really honest with yourself and in a way let it come out, let it speak what it wants to speak. So I've done this or I've done that, and really see what's there. So don't try to push it away, and then use it as a stepping stone. So if you go underneath the guilt, what do you feel? So if you go deeper and see if you can feel it in your body, where you feel it in your body, and if you go underneath, what's underneath the guilt? Like keep trying to use stepping stones. And normally underneath the guilt, there is a sense that you're bad, that you've sinned, that you've done something wrong. That's not personal to that story, but there's this underlying anxiety that you've done something wrong or you're going to do something wrong. And then if you go deeper than that anxiety, you might come to another layer of fear, that you're afraid of having choice and free will. It's true that you do, but this is what the separate person feels. So then see that fear of being alive, of your choices, of your capability, of what you could or don't do, and how you're afraid of the future. And then underneath that fear, you can see that there is a fear that comes from being separate. As soon as you're separate, there is just this fear of being alive. There's a fear of you being this small creature in relationship to this huge world. So it's like whatever you've got, just use it. But don't do this all day. Also listen to non-duality, that you're not that person. But just give yourself half an hour when you've got a really strong story to explore it. And see where those feelings are. So when you feel the fear or when you feel the guilt or when you feel you've sinned, feel where they are in the body. Like just put your attention there. And then see that there's something that knows that's never been affected. There's this sense of existence, that beingness that's never been affected. That never changes. What's changing is that in the dream. And while there's a belief that freedom is found in the dream, that will keep carrying on. But your freedom is there even in the discomfort.
Yeah. And maybe the stories which I'm telling myself, you said something like I should talk it out or something.
Yeah, not
really speak it out
yeah.
with mouth.
Yeah, but you can really speak it out, but don't do it with somebody else around. That's just too confusing.
Yeah,
Just by
course.
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
I told somebody that, and then they told me that they did it in front of their partner, and I was like, oh no.
You know what's also really good for my situation right now? Just taking a walk in nature, it's so uplifting. It's so uplifting.
Yeah.
Just connecting with the sunset or the woods and
and being outside of this fixation on yourself, like the environment that's outside you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And can I ask one last question?
Sure.
Okay, so you also mentioned a lot, and other teachers too, the dynamic of avoiding pleasure, avoiding pain, and seeking pleasure.
Yeah. Now the body is naturally set up to do that. Enlightened or not enlightened, that's a mammal, and we're a mammal.
Okay.
That's what a mammal does.
That's my question. There must be, or is there a difference between, normal neurotic human ignorance and the recognition of non-duality? Is there a difference in relating to pleasure and pain?
Yeah, because the difference is, and this is a huge difference, is that I, or people where that's happened, no longer in any way believe that there's ever any freedom in pleasure or pain. It's not even that I believe it, it's just that seeking comes with the belief that pleasure will bring you freedom and avoiding pain will bring you freedom. Pleasure and pain happen. It's part of being this animal. And it doesn't mean that I don't have animal expressions. So if somebody takes my dinner while I'm eating it, I don't get angry because actually that doesn't happen. But I would get angry at things. Like, it doesn't mean that I don't have emotional responses, but there is no sense underneath those emotional responses that any of those things complete me or take from me. What is completion is my nature, which is the amness and that empty looking, which is aliveness, which is the essence. So I still have the animal reaction. So if somebody came and stole my bag, I might chase after them and try and steal it back, like whatever it is. So I still have those reactions, but underneath it, nothing brings completion, because somebody would say, oh, but running after it means that you're looking for completion in it. But it's not at all. This is part of, like, there is a movement towards pleasure always. So there's going to be a movement towards eating. There's going to be a movement to having your own things. There's going to be a movement towards money. There's going to be a movement towards sex, whatever it is that brings pleasure. But none of them bring you completion. Your suffering all comes from the belief that you are a thing, that you are something, and that because you're that something, because you're separate, you've lost wholeness in some way, and that wholeness is in pleasure or pain. Wholeness is your essence. Wholeness is what looks always. But pleasure and pain don't have to go. And this is why at the beginning I was saying, it's really important to understand what it is to be human. Because like I have a natural creativity. So my way of being on the human level is an attraction towards creativity. And if I didn't know that about myself, or if I was awakening and I thought, oh, creativity is seeking pleasure, and I tried to stop it, then this is going to bring offense with identity. This happens with somebody that believes they understand what awakening is. Actually, the more and more free you become, the more that you're going to do that which you love, because the body's going to be drawn to it. And it's what I'm good at, is expressing, which is kind of like I'm good at creativity. Like I'm a triple Gemini. Well, it depends what star signs you read, but a triple Gemini. So my natural way is to express verbally, not as in like talking to people necessarily, but I write as well. I write films, I write plays, and I also have a high intellect. And so therefore, if I tried to deny that in some way and just went with people with low intellects, I'm sure there would be an element of fun to it, but there's going to be a part of me that's not stimulated. Like it's something that this body has. And so when you stop feeling guilty, when you stop trying to avoid things and you're lying to yourself, then you're just going to have this natural draw to that which you love. And that's why then when I talk about like you've got to follow what you love, it's not even that you've got to do it, it's that the way it is, that's what's going to begin to shine through. It's following that which you love. And we all have our natural talents, but we kind of get talked out of them by the stupid education system, and we get talked out of ourselves. We've all got a natural place in the pack.
Yeah.
And my place in the pack is the communicator and
Absolutely.
the storyteller.
I really realized that. It's amazing listening to you, It's wow.
It's a funny thing, because it's also funny for this personality as well, because I'm also an introvert.
Really?
But it's really funny that's like it's so funny.
Yeah, it's really funny.
But and this is why, like, knowing yourself on the human level, because we normally, what's happening to us is we've been conditioned so strongly by society of fear of money that we're not doing that which we're passionate about, because we're afraid of it.
That's why there are more and more burnouts and prescriptions of medicaments, medics and stuff. Yeah, it's a crazy world, isn't it?
Yeah, it was an identified society, so therefore we're all in this society that's identified.
Yeah, I've heard lastly a story about a guy that came to the early Indians in America. Do you call them Indians in English?
Yeah,
Um,
Indian Americans we call them. Yeah.
yeah, and one guy, I'm so out of my mind right now. It's so strange. I can't think clearly, but God,
This is most probably a good thing.
this happens a lot of time. When I'm in non-duality meetings or something, I want to say something,
Yeah.
but the head just won't go anymore.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
I think this is part of what happens this is why there is these talks, and because it's like an energetic thing that's pulling
Yeah.
you out of that constant obsession with the thinking.
It's like when I'm thinking I want to say something and then I'm in my head, and then the thoughts are going boom.
Yeah.
And
But this is what it's like all the time here. And then now, like I don't know what I'm going to say. Like I have no idea. And sometimes when I do these big metaphors, like halfway through it, I feel like I'm chuckling inside because I have no idea where the metaphor's going, and I'm like, bah, 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 bah. And sometimes it doesn't work, but a lot of the time it
Yeah.
does. Like, so
And
what happens is, what will begin to happen is you'll begin to drop into what you could call the big heart, and you'll stop acting from that place of the intellect, and the body will speak and do its thing
yeah.
without really having to think that much. It will
Because
still use.
when I'm talking, I'm mostly talking about the head, and also before I'm talking, I'm thinking what I should talk,
Yeah.
That's so heady.
Yeah.
And maybe when I'm talking to you or something, it's really another pattern,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's recognized somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does really good, to talk it out. Uh, I don't know the English word.
Spontaneously.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, absolutely spontaneously and not always with pre-thought.
Yeah, totally.
It's really more authentic. But there's again a fear then that I reveal something of myself that shouldn't be seen by other people, and
Yeah.
that's the fear, and that's why I'm in the head,
Yeah, that's why everybody's in the head, and this
Mhm.
is what the illusion of self is. You've been taught what you have to be, and then there's a natural way of being. And the reason that I can do these talks and do this sort of thing is because I don't have this idea of what I'm trying to be. Therefore, it just comes out. And then if I mess it up or say something really bad, then it just goes. It's like there might be a moment of embarrassment where my cheeks blush. So sometimes there's only one time that I've taken a video offline because of something I said, and that was because I can't even tell anyone why. No, it's not because of an identity thing, but it's because it could just get me in trouble.
Wow. Yeah, sorry,
You're
I was
totally
thinking
losing.
about, it's just so simple. It's really so
Simple.
simple.
It's like being a kid.
Yeah, and it's constantly overlooked,
Yeah. Yeah.
And also in seeking in non-duality, it's just a concept, non-duality. When I
Yeah.
talk about non-duality, I see the word non-duality
Yeah.
before in my head,
Yeah. I used
And
to have a teacher that would refuse to even put it in that category because
yeah,
it's another title, it doesn't matter. It's seeing that you aren't that person, that there is a freedom here that's got nothing to do with the intellect, nothing to do with any movement. And then on the personal level, it's becoming truly that person. Like the flower's truly blooming in its that flower size, that flower style. What we're taught as a person is that we've always got to be a different flower. And you're just going to be yourself, and then some will like you, some won't. Some will laugh at you,
wow.
some won't.
Yeah. And the hardest thing is when I sit with my parents, because my father, I don't want to talk bad about him, but he was always, in a way, the dominating part of the family, which compressed my feelings, my anger, my sadness, and stuff like that, and my whole personality in a way. And when I'm sitting in front of him and I want to talk and be authentically, it's so hard to be myself, because I constantly have to put on
Yeah,
my mask and my
yeah,
personality.
yeah. I mean, there might be a time where you can come where you could just say that to him, but if not,
Okay.
then it might be the time where you have to move away from him a bit. Like,
Yeah. For now, we are really coming closer,
that's nice.
Through my
And especially like your
yeah,
mum's reading A Course in Miracles, that's great.
yeah. She doesn't read it, she just has it
Oh,
because she got it for free. She never read it before. Yeah.
I should get
Have
it
you
for
read
free, that's sweet. I
it?
haven't read it, I've read parts of it.
Yeah, me.
And I know it well because when I first started speaking, for some reason I was very popular with the Course in Miracle communities. I still am actually, but not as popular as I was. So I used to have lots of people inviting me from Course in Miracles, and so I got to know it a lot through that.
Okay. But Lisa, there's coming up so many questions, and I think I will do a private session with you sometimes.
Okay. Well,
Because,
you can also
this,
call back next time as well.
yeah, of course. And I feel these are not only intellectual questions, but also really deeper
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's nice. I can really feel that there's an energetic thing happening with you.
absolutely. And about a half a year ago, I was at mm, the stars and things. Um, Astrology,
Oh yeah,
astrology.
yeah.
My mind is so stopping right now.
Do you know what I thought when you said that at the stars and things? Like I thought in England we have this thing like skating with stars at Christmas, and so you were like a year ago I was at the stars, and I was like, oh, and so I was thinking of famous people. Astrology, okay.
Yeah, and she said that, from my birth horoscope, that the next 2 years will be dying and birth or something like that. And I really feel that,
Yeah,
because she said that depression might start, and 3 months ago the deepest depression started, and
yeah,
I think we'll just go through that and let's see what is in 2 years. And,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's the most beautiful thing in a way, like when these things happen, even as though it's so painful and so
Mm,
uncomfortable, like something else does begin to grow out of it. Like it's
mm,
always changed this world.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's really amazing talking with you.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah,
thank you so
see you
much
as
for
well.
calling. It was nice to speak with you
Yeah, thank
again.
you. Okay,
And
we
speak
will
to you
see you
soon.
again.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, we just had a really drunk moment there. I'm not sure if you guys were able to follow what we were going to say at the end. I certainly wasn't. But I could feel very drunk. It's just an energetic thing.